The year is 1914. Paris is not the city of lights. It is a city of steam, of frantic whistles, and the heavy, rhythmic thud of jackboots on cobblestones. The Great War has arrived like a fever, and the French Ministry of War is a hive of panicked efficiency. They are processing millions of names, feeding the machine of mobilization with paper and ink. In the chaos of the clerical pool, a pen scratches across a telegram. It is addressed to a Dr. Mangin. In the logic of the era, the title of doctor is synonymous with man. It is an unbreakable law of the system, as rigid as the steel of a Liebel rifle. Nicole Mangin receives the summons in the quiet of her study. She is a specialist in tuberculosis, a researcher who understands the microscopic wars that happen inside the human chest. She reads the orders. They are clear. She is to report for duty immediately. She does not hesitate. She packs her instruments, dons a heavy wool coat, and steps into the tide of history. When she arrives at the mobilization center, the air is thick with the smell of unwashed wool and tobacco. She stands in a line of men, a solitary figure of composed defiance. When she finally reaches the desk of the presiding officer, the silence that follows is more deafening than the trains outside. The officer looks at the paper. He looks at Nicole. He looks at the paper again. To the ministry, she is a glitch, a mechanical failure in the bureaucracy. "There has been a mistake," the officer says, his voice a mixture of confusion and growing irritation. "We summoned a Dr. Mangin, a man. You are a woman." Nicole does not flinch. "I am Dr. Mangin," she replies, "and you have a war to win." But the system does not like anomalies. To the high command, Nicole Mangin is a problem to be solved, not a resource to be used. They view the battlefield as a sacred masculine space, a theater where women are meant to be characters of grief, not agents of healing. One high-ranking official is heard to remark, with the cold certainty of a man who believes he owns the future, "An army is a machine of men, not a nursery for ladies. If she is here, it is because a clerk has failed his duty. We shall find a way to return this error to her kitchen before the first shot is fired." They try to bury her in paperwork. They try to shunt her to the furthest corners of the rear. But the boss, the brutal reality of industrial warfare, is about to deliver a punishment for their arrogance. The French army is marching toward a catastrophe called Plan 17th. They believe in Elaine the idea that sheer bravery and a bayonet charge can overcome machine guns. It is a fatal delusion. Within weeks, the fatal flaw of their medical system is exposed. The mechanism of death is simple but relentless. The French medical manual treats the soldier like a broken toy. You pick him up, you carry him miles to the rear, and eventually, a surgeon looks at him. But the modern battlefield is a factory of infection. The soil of France is saturated with manure, teeming with anaerobic bacteria. When a piece of shrapnel tears through a wool tunic and into a thigh, it carries the earth with it. The black box of 1914 medicine is this: the longer the gap between the wound and the knife, the higher the rate of gas gangrene. The bacteria multiply in the airless depths of the wound, turning living flesh into a blackened, bubbling mass of rot. It is a biological clock, and the French army has no way to stop it. As the first wave of mangled bodies begins to pour back from the front, the hospitals in Paris become charnel houses. The system is screaming in panic. The prestigious male surgeons are overwhelmed, their hands shaking as they realize their textbooks didn't prepare them for the sheer volume of the dead. While the generals stare at maps that no longer make sense, Nicole Mangin is in the shadows of a makeshift ward. She is not waiting for permission anymore. She sees the pattern that the experts missed. She sees that the soldiers aren't dying from their wounds, they are dying from the time it takes to treat them. She stands over a young corporal, his leg a map of purple veins and the stench of decay. The senior surgeon wants to wait for a specialist. Nicole picks up a scalpel. "If we wait," she says, her voice cutting through the moans of the dying. "He is a corpse. If we act now, he is a soldier." She performs the debridement with a surgical precision that borders on the prophetic. She is working in a world that refuses to acknowledge her rank, yet she is the only one who understands the physics of the disaster. She is the outlier, the clerical error that is about to become the only thing standing between an army and its own extinction. The High Command still wants her gone. They believe the natural order will restore itself. But the thunder in the distance is growing louder. The German army is closing in, and the meat grinder of the 20th century is about to begin. Bafim. By February 1916, the war has stopped being a conflict of men and has become a conflict of chemistry and kinetic energy. The place is Verdun. The French call it l'enfer hell. The German strategy is no longer to capture land, but to bleed France white. They have gathered every heavy gun in the Kaiser's arsenal, aiming to turn the hills of the Meuse into a landscape of pulverized bone and charred timber. The earth here does not just shake, it screams. The German 420mm Big Bertha shells don't just explode, they create localized earthquakes, collapsing trenches like houses of cards. This is industrial slaughter at its most efficient, and at the center of this hurricane of steel is Nicole Mangin. She has been promoted to a captain, though the ministry still refuses to officially recognize her rank on her pay stub. To them, she remains a phantom, a temporary necessity they hope to exercise once the smoke clears. But while the generals in their distant chateaus move pins across maps, Nicole is living in the viscous reality of the front. The military establishment is still operating on a Napoleonic mindset. Their hospitals are static, massive structures miles behind the lines, connected by narrow, clogged roads. To the generals, the system is a series of stages. The soldier falls, the stretcher bearers find him, the wagon carries him, and eventually, hours or days later, the doctor sees him. But the mud of Verdun is a thief. It steals time. It steals blood. The mechanism of failure in the French medical corps is the distance between the trauma and the blade. A man shot in the gut at dawn is a dead man by noon if he has to wait for a horse-drawn cart to navigate 5 miles of shell craters. The system is a bottleneck, and the bottleneck is a death sentence. Nicole Mangin sees the tragedy for what it is, a problem of logistics. She realizes that in the age of the machine gun, the hospital can no longer be a destination. It must be a weapon. She begins to sketch designs for something the world has never seen. The auto cheer. These are mobile surgical units, trucks outfitted with sterilization equipment, X-ray machines, and collapsible operating tables. It is a hospital on wheels, designed to chase the front line, to meet the wounded before the infection can take root. But the crystallized arrogance of the medical corps stands in her way. She presents her findings to a senior medical inspector, a man whose uniform is as stiff as his imagination. He looks at her diagrams of motorized clinics and scoffs. "Dr. Mangin," he says, his voice dripping with a condescending pity, "an army moves at the pace of its infantry, not the whims of a woman with a motor car. These mobile units are a distraction. They are expensive, they are loud, and they will only get in the way of the supply columns. Stick to your sutures and leave the logistics to the men who understand the terrain." He treats her innovation as a toy. He believes the status quo is a fortress, but he has fatally underestimated the boss, the relentless, indifferent cruelty of the German artillery. While he toasts to tradition in the rear, the German guns have already begun their 21-hour bombardment. The roads he relies on are being vaporized. The static hospitals he trusts are being systematically leveled. The fortress is made of paper, and the fire is coming. The bombardment of Verdun is not a series of explosions. It is a single, continuous wall of sound that vibrates through the teeth and the marrow. Inside a dugout at Fleury, Nicole Mangin is operating. The space is 5 feet wide, lit by the flickering orange glow of oil lamps and the staccato flashes of shells landing outside. The ceiling is made of oak beams that groan under the weight of the shifting earth. Dust, the fine gray powder of pulverized limestone, falls into every open wound. This is the kept black box of Mangin's triage. In this dugout, she has discarded the rule book. In the old system, you treated the most severely wounded first. Nicole realizes this is a mathematical trap. If you spend 3 hours on a man who will likely die anyway, 10 men with survivable wounds will bleed out in the hallway. She implements a brutal, lightning-fast categorization. She doesn't just look at the wound, she looks at the probability. She is a human sieve, separating the living from the lost with a single touch of the pulse. While the system outside is screaming in panic with officers crying for reinforcements that never arrive, Nicole is holding the silence. She is performing 30 surgeries in a single 24-hour shift. Her hands are a blur of steel and silk. When the ceiling vibrates from a direct hit, she doesn't look up. She simply shields the patient's open chest with her own body, waits for the dirt to settle, and continues. She is the ghost in the machine. While the establishment is paralyzed by the collapse of their traditional structures, she is thriving in the chaos. Because she was always an outsider, she never trusted the system to begin with. She built her own reality, a mobile, adaptive world that lives in the gaps of the military's failure. A shell strikes the entrance of the dugout. The lights go out. For a moment, there is only the sound of men breathing in the dark, a wet, rattling sound. Nicole doesn't call for help. She reaches into her bag, produces a small electric torch, and grips it between her teeth. The beam of light falls on the shrapnel-torn belly of a boy who cannot be more than 19. The logic of the era says he is a lost cause. The manual says to give him morphine and move on. But Nicole sees the fatal flaw in the manual's pessimism. She sees that the boy's vitals are holding. She sees a chance. Working by the narrow beam of her own light, she performs a resection of the bowel in under 20 minutes. It is a feat of surgical gymnastics that would be impossible in a clean Paris theater, yet she does it here, in the mud, with the world collapsing around her. She is outthinking the Reaper. But as the sun rises over the blackened stumps of the Verdun forests, a new horror arrives. It is not a shell, but a gas. Phosgene. It rolls into the trenches like a heavy, greenish-white mist. It smells like musty hay, but it acts like acid on the lungs. The system has no answer for this. The masks are primitive. The protocols are non-existent. The hospitals are filling with men who are drowning on dry land, their lungs filling with their own fluid. Nicole stands at the entrance of her dugout, watching the fog roll in. She knows that her scalpels cannot cut out a gas. She knows that her triage cannot fix a chemical burn. For the first time, she feels the weight of the massive system, the sheer, mindless scale of the destruction. The High Command finally realizes their mistake. They see that the static hospitals have become mass graves. They send a frantic courier to Mangin's dugout. The message is simple. Deploy the mobile units. Immediately. The very men who mocked her auto cheers now beg for them. They realize too late that the error was not Nicole Mangin. The error was their own belief that they could control a modern war with 19th century minds. Nicole reads the order. She looks at the exhausted orderlies, at her blood-stained apron, and at the boy she saved in the dark. She does not feel vindicated. She feels a cold, forensic anger. "Tell them," she says to the courier, her voice steady and hollow, "that the mobile units are already moving. I didn't wait for their permission to save their army." But as she prepares to move her clinic into the heart of the gas cloud, she sees a figure approaching through the haze. It is a representative of the ministry, sent to oversee the transition. He is wearing a pristine uniform, untouched by the mud of the trenches. He looks at Nicole disheveled, covered in the copper-smelling grime of the theater, and his lip curls in an old, familiar reflex. "Dr. Mangin," he says, adjusting his spectacles. "A remarkable effort, but we must discuss the accounting of these vehicles. There are protocols for the requisition of petrol that have not been followed. The hammer is about to fall. The Germans are preparing a final, massive push on the sector, and this bureaucrat is worried about petrol receipts. He believes the paperwork will protect him from the storm. He believes the rules still apply. But history is about to remind him that in the meat grinder, the only thing that matters is the speed of the blade. The boss is coming, and he doesn't care about protocols." The ground at Verdun is no longer earth. It is a soup of metal, bone, and chemical residue. In the final, desperate months of the battle, the German High Command launches one last surge, a wall of fire meant to break the French spirit once and for all. Inside her mobile, auto cheer, Nicole Mangin is moving. The truck bounces over craters that could swallow a horse. The glass in the windows has long since shattered, replaced by oiled paper that rattles with every shockwave. This is the visceral peak of her war. She is no longer just a doctor. She is a mechanic of the human soul. She is operating on a moving floor, her boots slick with a mixture of mud and the lifeblood of men she doesn't know. The time freeze happens here, in the silence between the shells. Nicole stands over a stretcher. The patient is a captain of the infantry. His chest has been opened by a jagged piece of a 75 shell. The air in the truck is thick with the smell of ozone and ether. She can see the rhythmic, frantic thud of his heart. It is a fragile thing, a piece of wet machinery trying to keep a man alive in a world that wants him dead. She reaches in. Her fingers, steady and cold, find the shrapnel. In this moment, the massive system outside the empires, the treaties, the billions of francs does not exist. There is only the texture of the steel against her glove. There is only the choice of where to cut. She realizes with a forensic clarity that her entire life has led to this specific clerical error. Because she was a woman, she had to be twice as fast. Because she was an outsider, she had to be twice as precise. She removes the metal. The heart continues to beat. The cruel irony of her victory is that as she saves the individual, the system is already preparing to discard the savior. While she stitches the captain's skin, the Ministry of War is already drafting the demobilization papers that will list her not as a captain of the medical corps, but as a temporary volunteer. The war ends not with a bang, but with a sudden, suffocating silence. It is 1919. Paris is celebrating. The streets are flooded with the blue horizon, the uniforms of the victors. There are medals for the generals and parades for the colonels. But Nicole Mangin is not in the parade. The institutional walls have closed back in. The code anomaly of her service is being quietly, efficiently erased. The same men who begged for her mobile hospitals in the mud of Verdun now find her presence inconvenient. They reclaim the auto cheers, stripping them of their equipment and returning them to the motor pools. The bitter victory is this: Nicole has saved thousands of lives. She has redesigned the very architecture of modern emergency medicine. Yet, when she applies for her military pension, the application is returned. The reason? According to the files, Dr. Nicole Mangin never officially existed in the ranks of the French army. She was a ghost in the machine, a clerical error that had been corrected. She returns to her apartment in Paris. She is exhausted, her lungs scarred by the gas she breathed while treating others, her mind a library of screams she can never unhear. She dies shortly after the armistice, at the age of 41. Some say it was an overdose of chloral hydrate, a sedative for the nerves. Others say her heart simply ran out of reasons to beat in a world that refused to see her. She is buried in a quiet corner of a cemetery, her name relegated to a footnote. The system had won. It had protected its pride by burying its most brilliant mistake. If you believe that forgotten stories deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing, like. And today, if you look at a modern trauma center or see a MASH unit deployed to a disaster zone, you are looking at the ghost of Nicole Mangin. Every mobile operating theater, every triage system that prioritizes survival over rank is a descendant of the Inde error the French ministry tried to delete. We see this same hubris in our society today. We see the experts cling to outdated manuals while the outsiders, the glitches, offer the only real solutions. We see institutions that value the procedure more than the person. The story of Nicole Mangin is a mirror. It asks us, how many geniuses are we currently ignoring because they don't fit the protocol? How much blood are we willing to spill to protect a status quo that has already failed? The tragedy of the Great War wasn't just the millions who died. It was the refusal of the powerful to learn from the one person who knew how to save them. Nicole Mangin proved that the human spirit is more resilient than any system. but she also proved that the system is more patient than any hero. She was the doctor the world didn't want, but the one it couldn't survive without. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.